What's up, YouTube? Back again for another, well, this isn't going to be an album review, but instead I will be ranking my top 5 Beatles albums of all time. So a little change up from my normal stuff, besides reviews. But yeah, this was obviously a very hard task to do. I mean, this list has probably changed 2 or 3 times just since I've started thinking of my top 5, so it's really hard. I mean, obviously the Beatles, every album they had is good, and most of them are great. So, I mean, this is just a hard decision to make. As a matter of fact, one of the albums in my top 5 wasn't even in the top 5 about a week or 2 ago. So, I mean, it's just crazy how much that you could change because the Beatles obviously had so many great albums. So, I mean, it's almost impossible to think of this. I mean, of course, this is, this is a, changeable list. But, yeah. I'll go ahead and start with number 5. As you can see here, number 5, Magical Mystery Tour, 1967. This album is really good. It's got some of the Beatles' most recognizable songs on it. I mean, it really does. It's got some of their best songs. I'm the Walrus, Hello Goodbye, Strawberry Fields Forever, Penny Lane, All You Need Is Love, etc., etc. The list goes on. I mean, this is just a great album. Their second album of 1967, and this is just, just epic album. It's close to perfect. I mean, this is, it followed Sgt. Pepper's, and this is just a great album that I don't think gets enough credit really in the Beatles discography. So Magical Mystery Tour is great, and that's my number 5 favorite Beatles album. Coming in at number 4, which I consider to be the Beatles' best early album, Rubber Soul. This album at first wasn't even in my top 5. This was probably at my number 7 or so spot. Now it's all the way up to 4 because I just love this album so much, and I've grown more fond of it recently even. So I mean, there's not a bad song on this album. It's just so consistent. I mean, Drive My Car, Norwegian Wood, Nowhere Man, Michelle, Girl, In My Life, just some absolute classics on this album. There's not a bad song on this album. Every song is good on here. Most are better than good. Rubber Soul is just awesome album. Released in 1965. I mean, everybody, this is very Bob Dylan influenced, folky influence. This is just an awesome album, and it's my number 4. It's on my number 4 position on my favorite Beatles albums. So Rubber Soul is great. Coming in number 3, what is considered to be maybe the best album of all time, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, released in 1967. This album, obviously everybody knows this album. Might be the most iconic album cover in history. I mean, this is just an awesome album. I mean, it's just what it is. It's got some of their best songs on it. I mean, you can't say anything else about this album. With a Little Help from My Friends, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, Fixing a Hole, Getting Better, A Day in the Life, Lovely Rita, the list goes on. This album is just phenomenal. There's not a bad song on it. It was a revolutionary, ahead of its time, cutting-edge album. I mean, everybody knows it. So, I mean, it's just absolutely epic. I think it has to be in your top 5. I mean, I think, people don't give it enough credit just because they want to be hipsters or contrarians or whatever. But, I mean, this album's just great. That's just what it is. So, number 3, Sgt. Pepper's. Coming in at number 2, the Beatles' last recorded album, not their last released album, but their second to last released album, that being the epic Abbey Road, released in 1969. This album is just absolutely amazing, phenomenal. This is a 10. All these albums are pretty much 10 out of 10, or close to it, and this is 10 out of 10 for sure. I mean, Abbey Road is just amazing. That's just all there is to it. It's got some of my absolute favorite Beatles songs, some of my favorite songs in general on this album. I mean, Come Together, Something, Maxwell Silverhammer, Oh Darling, Octopus's Garden, I Want You, She's So Heavy, Here Comes the Sun. I mean, my lord, this album's just amazing. The Abbey Road medley is amazing. Golden Slumbers in that. I mean, come on, this album is just absolutely phenomenal. This is also one of the most iconic album covers in history. Abbey Road is just freaking amazing. Let's just call it like it is. It's an amazing album that it falls in my number 2 position on my top 5 Beatles albums. So just absolutely great album that you need to hear if you haven't heard it. If you haven't heard it, then get with the program. It's awesome. But now, my number 1 favorite Beatles album of all time, and in my opinion, arguably, this might be the best album of all time in my opinion. It's up there, but that being Revolver. 1966's Revolver. This is ranked as the 3rd greatest album of all time by Rolling Stone magazine, and Revolver is just absolutely, just incredible. This is what it is. It is so ahead of its time. This is when the Beatles first went psychedelic. and this album it's got everything. It has absolutely everything you could want. Revolver's absolutely just incredible. That's just what it is. Taxman, Eleanor Rigby, I'm Only Sleeping, Love You Too, Here, There, and Everywhere, She Said, She Said, I mean, Tomorrow Never Knows, 401. There's just too many songs on this album that are just absolutely great. There's not a bad song on this album, and this is just absolutely beyond classic, beyond perfect album. So Revolver's absolutely phenomenal. My favorite Beatles album of all time. So yeah, those are my top 5 Beatles albums. Obviously there's not a bad Beatles album, but all these I think stand out above the rest. Some other notable mentions are the White Album at number 6 probably. But Let It Be, I love Let It Be, it's up there too. Help's really good, but I mean there's, you know, obviously the Beatles have so many, so yeah. So that was my list of my top 5 favorite Beatles albums of all time. Thank you all for watching, and more videos will be up in the future. Thanks for watching.